So let's jump in. So some objectives, things we're going to talk about: the purpose of a lit review, the process of how we conduct a lit review, and the process of writing an articulate lit review, or what's called a meta-analysis. And if you're like, I don't know what that is, I will talk about that toward the end. So review of related literature. A lot of times this is where a research question comes from, because we're going to look to see what's already been reported, and then we can find sort of a little spot for our own personal research to kind of fall into place. So we're locating research related to whatever we want to study. We're analyzing documents. It provides you information so that you don't do something that's already been done. There's no point in that. And it also provides information to help you frame your study in terms of what's been conducted before your work begins. Helps you identify research strategies, data collection, like what you can do. And then it facilitates your ability to interpret your findings. Everything that we do in the discussion part of your final manuscript should be compared back to what we know to be true in the literature. So all of the results that you have should be compared and contrasted with the existing literature. If you don't have the existing literature, like a good handle on that, really difficult to provide those comparisons. And then it's hard to make a meaning of what your results are because you don't know what generally is true in other contexts. So the scope: avoid the temptation to include everything. A lot of times we start with just, a giant search through the library, EBSCO or whatever it is, and we just start pulling everything that has, whatever in the title or anything that's even remotely whatever. That just creates a giant pile that you have to weed through. Try to choose the manuscripts that you're going to spend time reviewing so that they align with, what's most likely to help you in the research work that you're doing. So when you're doing something that's been researched a lot, right, try to be more specific. Try to find research that's been done, let's say recently, or if you're working with high schoolers, try to find research on whatever the topic is in high school settings or in high school math classes. Try to be as specific as you can. I usually start real specific, and then if I can't find what I need, then I start to be more general. So if I can't find, let's say I was looking back to my example, high school math, then I might just look at whatever my topic is in high school students, or whatever the topic is among K-12 students, and kind of broaden out until I get to the point where I have enough to be able to create my literature review. So sometimes we pick and choose problems that there's not a lot of research, and that's the reason why we want to study it, because there hasn't been a lot done. But you have to find things that are at least a little bit connected for that comparison and like contrasting that you do at the end. If you pick too much, all it's going to do is sort of weigh you down. It's probably going to really just wear you down. Like you're not going to want to continue with the study. So try to choose the things that you think are most important to start with, and then go from there. You may have to do a little bit more digging, like as you learn more about your issue, to help support what you need for your final manuscript, but at least start with some of what you think will be the most helpful. So some steps: identify, make a list of keywords. So when I'm looking in physical education settings, a lot of times I'm typing in keywords like beginning, physical education, physical educator. I might put efficacy in that. I might put in, like, in quotes, use of technology, whatever it is that I'm studying. We can start to find those sources. You're going to search the databases using your keywords, and then usually you can pull up like an abstract that will show you like what it's about. So in a little piece, you can just read about it, see if it's something that pertains. If it is, then you can use that source. If it's not, then you just go to the next option. So you want to try to use sources that are peer-reviewed. That means that they've been through a process where other quote unquote experts have reviewed the research and have deemed it as following the right kinds of guidelines. It is important when you're going through the lit review that these initial sources, that you create an abstract or some kind of way to annotate your sources so that you have the notes that you need and that you're not at risk of plagiarizing material from the original source. Then you can analyze and organize your sources. I usually create, after I do the lit review, I create an outline of what I want to go into my manuscript. And then I start to cut and paste from my annotations the things that I need to support those different parts of the outline. Once that's done and you have all of your sources and kind of the big ideas from those sources, then you can sit down and write the literature review. So some tips. Think about where the source was published. Right? A referee journal means that there is an editorial board of people who look at the research to make sure that it's been conducted in a way that is objective, a way that's ethical, a way that's meaningful, right? If it's like an opinion, somebody's like, let's say it's on a blog, that's not empirical research. And a lot of times that doesn't hold up well when you're making comparisons. Look at the methodology. How was a study conducted? You can look at how many participants were in it. Okay, a lot less generalizability if you're looking at a case study with one participant than if you're looking at a study where there's 1,000 participants across all different ages. Okay, look at the methods. Was the study conducted in one day? Was it conducted over the course of a year? Generally, the longer the study, the more participants in a study, the more that you can generalize those sources. And then we want to make sure that this wasn't a study conducted 50 years ago. We want to make sure that we have some research that is relevant to now, today. We can use some of that historical research to help support our findings of what used to be compared to what is, but you want most of your research sources to be current, like the last 5 to 10 years. So some steps for annotating: you're going to read the abstract, you're going to skim it, and then I usually write an APA, the entire reference, because then I can just cut and paste it into my reference page later. So it saves me a step when I'm finishing up my manuscript. And then you're going to classify and code the article. We talked about that with the qualitative methods. So the keywords, what the big ideas are, something that's meaningful to you. We're going to annotate or summarize a source. So everything that's the big idea, if it's a direct quote that I think is powerful, I usually just take that and add it right in. We're going to include any thoughts that come to mind, any statements that are quotes, so that we have those. Make sure that you write down the page number. APA requires that if you use a quote in your manuscript, that you also include the page number. The theoretical framework, super important. This is what we tie things back to. I gave a couple examples here of what this means. This is what we know to be true in most all cases. So, for example, a lot of you will use constructivism. It's a Piaget in terms of the stages of cognitive development. I use a lot of self-determination theory, which is intrinsic versus extrinsic motivation. That's Ryan and Deci. Occupational socialization, because I'm looking at how teachers deal with their surroundings, and that's Lawson. So find the theorist, and then you'll have some ideas about the theory that will go into your literature review. We organize and report to the literature. We're looking for similarities and differences, not just this study said this. This study said this. It's not a listing of the studies. You're taking all the similarities of the studies that you read and grouping those together, all the things that contrast and grouping those together. That's called it's called a meta-analysis. And what it does is it allows us to take all of this data and comprise it to one sort of overarching theme. You can see sort of the different stages here, but that's the really, really important part. Okay. When we look at effect sizes, this is a statistical measure. I'm not going to get into this too much, but you can see it here on the slide. I think it's pretty important when we talk about what needs to be. Okay, just to summarize, an effective lit review is really important for getting your study off or your manuscript off into the right foot, and it will allow you to analyze results in a way that's meaningful for you and for the reader. It helps provide a connection between the theory, what we know to be true, and what you found in your study.